Hello, gremlins! As a follow-up to my video a few weeks ago where I redrew the cover of a book I wrote in middle school, today I'm redrawing a picture I drew 7 years ago of the characters in that story. This image actually predates the writing of the book. I drew it during a witchcraft phase I had between 5th and 6th grade. 3 of the 4 characters in this drawing are present in the book I wrote, although in their very early form. The witch in particular is described very differently in the book than in the drawing. The 4th character in the drawing isn't a character in the book at all, and the 4th main character from the story doesn't appear in this drawing. I'm going to be referencing the book, which was called Haunt School, a lot in this video, and while I'll try to add context to explain my decisions in this drawing, if you are curious about the very bad plot of a book I wrote when I was a preteen, check out my previous video on this project, linked here. Previously, when redrawing my old art, I may update character designs and of course improve the execution of my original ideas, but in this image I made the most changes I've made so far. I decided to stick with the book canon rather than the drawing canon, and just use the drawing as a jumping off point. I used the book descriptions of characters for their updated looks, and I removed the random skeleton girl from my redraw, instead drawing Kira the werewolf. I also changed the poses and order that the characters appear in the image. In my 7-year-old drawing, the characters are all evenly spaced and not interacting at all. Lilith the witch and the random skeleton are looking at the viewer, while Celeste the ghost and Venus the vampire are shown in side profile, looking at each other. In the redraw, I grouped the characters together, like they're posing for a photo. Lilith is still on the far left, Kira in the skeleton's place next to Lilith. Venus and Celeste's places were switched, because Venus is corporeal and can more easily interact physically with the others than Celeste can. Kira has an arm around Venus's shoulder, and her other arm is resting on Lilith like she's an armrest. Venus is leaning into Kira with her arms crossed, and Celeste is close to the others but a little distant, as she is in the book. While in the original image, all 4 characters are roughly the same height and have the same body type, except of course the skeleton, I made the redraw more dynamic by giving everyone a unique silhouette. Lilith is plus-sized, chubby and short with a round face and a mass of curly hair. Kira is the tallest of the group, athletic due to the amount of running around she does as a wolf on the full moon. Venus is shorter than Kira, with an hourglass figure. Celeste is almost as short as Lilith, although she's making herself look taller by floating a few inches above the ground. I started this drawing with a very basic sketch to put all the characters into place and figure out how they're all interacting with each other, as well as the very basics of each person's outfit. I then went back for a more detailed sketch layer to add details, figure out the faces and fingers, etc. All the outfits are drawn as I described them in Haunt School, whether those outfits are good or not. I started the line art with Lilith first. Once again, I'm adding the thickest outline around the silhouette of each character, to clearly differentiate each character even where they overlap, then using a variety of thinner lines for all the inner details. Lilith has the most out-there style of the 4 girls, and her outfit in this image is one of the wildest outfits I described in Haunt School. She's wearing a lime green turtleneck under a black and white checked dress, with mismatched stripy knee-high socks, Mary Jane shoes, and a pointed witch hat. She also has several necklaces, including a crescent moon necklace, which isn't in the book, but is a detail I think she would wear. Her outfit also took the longest to draw because of all the details in the checks of the dress, as well as the curls in her hair. I still have not mastered drawing curly hair. Lilith is posing with a peace sign and 1 foot off the ground. While none of the characters in Haunt School have much of a personality, Lilith is bubbly and impulsive. She is the character who incites the very dumb plan to sneak out of school to visit a forbidden zombie graveyard near the beginning of the book, which kind of sets off every other very contrived plot point I came up with. The next character I outlined is Kira, a werewolf. I definitely followed the Monster High school of design for her werewolf features, giving her wolf ears despite her current human form. I also gave her the wrong hairstyle. In Haunt School, she's described as putting her hair in a messy braid, but I gave her a messy ponytail. Kira also has some of the least interesting outfits in the book, usually wearing plain crop tops and leggings with boots. I followed the same silhouette, but I made her crop top more interesting by adding a Phases of the Moon design. I also gave her arm hair, since she's a werewolf, and her pointed canines are on display in her wide smile. Her nails are long and claw-like. Venus looks very much like Eden, a different vampire OC I made around the same time. You can learn more about Eden here. I'm pretty sure both vampires are modeled after Mavis from Hotel Transylvania, with bobbed hair and bangs and wearing leggings under a skirt with a cape. Venus's cape is secured with a bat-shaped clasp, as it is described in the book. She's wearing a turtleneck and a pleated skirt with a stripe around the hem. She also has leggings and platform boots. In the book, I describe Venus as quite beauty-oriented, putting a lot of effort into her appearance and wearing luxury clothing. She's from a rich family and is taking after her mother, who is quite glamorous. Venus canonically takes the longest of anyone to get ready in the morning, wearing a full face of makeup every day. She also has braces, although those don't end up appearing in this drawing as she's smiling with a closed mouth. I outlined Celeste last, and kept switching between my work in progress and the recently redrawn cover where I previously updated her design. I used blue outlines rather than black for Celeste, since she's a ghost. Celeste is the only character whose appearance isn't described in the book, but she died at age 14 in the Victorian period, so last time I drew her, I gave her a simple crinoline dress with a collar detail and buttons down the front. Her hair is long and loose, and her eyes are plain white. Celeste struggles with depression and feels distant from her roommates, even though she sees them as friends. She's floating slightly apart from the other girls, who are all physically connected. Before I ever wrote Haunt School, before these 4 characters even existed, I was already world-building a world where spooky characters lived in the woods and went to boarding school together. There were witches, vampires, werewolves, ghosts, skeletons, cat people, and wizards, and probably some others that I'm forgetting. I spent a summer drawing these spooky characters a lot in a sketchbook. I gave each type of being a different color palette and design when drawing them. Very obvious color palettes. Vampires wear red and black and all have black hair. Werewolves wear all brown. Ghosts appear pale blue. Witches wear black, orange, green, and purple. This particular witch is wearing a lime green turtleneck under a patterned dress. The checks of the dress took me a while to draw. I sped things up a bit by selecting the insides of the outlines to fill, but that only works within closed lines, and all the checks on the edges of the dress and folds are open outlines. I drew all the black checks, then filled in the rest of the dress with white. Lilith likes a lot of bright colors and eclectic fashion choices. For example, one sock is black and orange, the other is black and green. Her hair is black with streaks of purple, which she adds with, quote, purple streaking dye. I wish it was that easy to add color to hair, it's probably magic. While I didn't know of the scene subculture when I was writing Haunt School, Lilith definitely has some style overlap with scene kids. In the old drawing, Lilith looks a lot more like a different witch OC I was creating around the same time, with green curly hair and red-rimmed eyes. I ignored almost all those design details in the redraw. However, there are 2 elements I kept. The updated Lilith still has a pointed witch hat with a buckled orange band around her head, and she still has slightly red-rimmed eyes. I originally was also going to retain her yellow and black striped socks, but they looked too much like bee stripes, so I changed the color to mismatched green and orange. I did not color the characters in the same order I outlined them in. Instead, I tackled Celeste next. Celeste is one of the easiest characters to color, since she's entirely different shades of the same tone of blue. However, I did go back to check my previous drawing of Celeste to make sure the shades I used matched. Celeste has dark hair, well, dark within the range of blues I used, and a mid-toned dress with darker stripes. Her skin is very pale. Celeste also glows slightly, and when I get to the shading, that cast light will highlight Venus and to a lesser extent, Kira. Often when I draw vampires, I still end up defaulting to silver jewelry, since I like silver, and silver feels more gothic than gold. However, in vampire lore, that just doesn't work. Vampires are weak to silver. I made sure in this drawing to give Venus gold jewelry instead, despite the fact that I didn't do so in the book. She isn't wearing much jewelry, just simple hoop earrings and the bat-shaped clasp on her cape. Venus is dressed in the very basic vampire color palette. Her cape is black, her turtleneck is dark red, and her skirt is black as well with a red accent stripe. Venus's design overlaps Celeste's slightly, which leads to a bit of a complication since Celeste is transparent. I ended up redrawing part of Venus's cape on a separate layer behind Celeste, so that Celeste's glow highlights it. Venus has very pale skin, which she's made slightly rosier with blush on her cheeks and red lipstick. When shading her lipstick, which is satiny and shiny, I decided to let her show off her fangs a bit. I did not remember to give those fangs braces, but I can explain that away. Only the tip of her teeth are visible over her lips, and the part with the braces bracket is still in her mouth behind her smile. Venus isn't the kind of character to show off that she has braces, rather hiding them until her smile is perfect again. I coloured Kira last, since she has the least interesting colour palette. I don't know why I decided every werewolf should wear only brown in this world. I did change that rule a bit for this redraw, giving her a grey shirt rather than a brown one, but I had to make sure the shades of brown I used for her boots, leggings, skin, and hair all worked together and didn't clash, while also not being too similar and blending into each other. It also makes the balance of the final drawing a bit off, having a character in neon green and high contrast black and white, next to a character entirely in mid-tones of brown with no real contrast in her design. The image is dim. It's set in a hallway or chamber of the haunted mansion in which Haunt School is set, but I didn't want it to be dark, since dark images don't do well with YouTube upload compression. Unfortunately, I didn't know that in a video I uploaded recently, and the second drawing of that video is completely incomprehensible because all the dark shades I used just turned into a mass of black. I wanted to avoid that fate for this drawing, so the shading isn't super high contrast, despite the lack of light sources. I shaded the 3 corporeal characters with purple shadows, going one at a time, and Celeste with dark blue, separately, since cast light doesn't affect her. I shaded Celeste first, since she's different from the others. Most of Celeste was simple to shade, but her skirt was a bit more complicated, through no fault of the skirt itself. Skirts are usually really easy to shade, especially with simple folds like Celeste has. However, trying to shade those folds smoothly without accidentally shading her arms clasped in front of the skirt was difficult. It shouldn't have been difficult, but I made things way harder for myself by trying to select only the skirt to shade. It did get shaded eventually, but it wasn't as smooth a shade as I could have gotten had I done things the normal way. Once again, I shaded everyone in a new and different order, going from Celeste to shading Kira. I shaded her skin twice, once just using skin tones, and again with the same purple that the rest of Kira is shaded with. It's become become a way for me to add multiple undertones to skin and still give the shadows the same color as the rest of the shadows on the clothing and hair. I then moved on to Venus and made her hair even shinier, since she is exactly the kind of person to use a lot of hair products to get that result. I also didn't shade the skin separately this time, since Venus is a vampire, extremely pale, and doesn't have blood, so her skin wouldn't look natural anyway. Venus was the easiest character to shade. There were no huge areas of plain color which I needed to make look smooth, and all the shapes that needed shading were quite simple. The simplest part to shade was the skirt, but the turtleneck shading also worked really well. I moved on from shading the easiest character to shade to the most difficult, Lilith. Lilith has quite rosy skin, with flushed cheeks and red knees. There's also a lot of shadows on her face from her wayward curls, making that bit of shading a little more challenging. However, her skin was easy to shade compared to her hair. Someday I'll get the hang of shading curls. Today was not that day. I just kept adding colour and blending it out and hoping it would all turn out okay in the end, with no real method other than making the hair near the neck darkest. I added a few highlights to her purple streaks and moved on, and while I'm not super proud of her hair, I did the best I could. The rest of the shading was uneventful. One slightly notable detail that I added was extra shine to Lilith's leather shoes, just because the shoes were too dark to show any dimension before. When I finished shading Lilith, I went back to Venus and Kira to add highlights from Celeste's glow. Those highlights aren't bright, Celeste isn't a fluorescent light bulb or anything, but Kira's arm and the side of Venus facing Celeste are tinted light blue. It looks almost as though they are being lit by a computer screen. In fact, it's the same method of shading I use when a screen is casting light on someone. With that, it was time to move on to the background, and I kept the background simple, basically drawing a slightly more detailed and textured version of the very simple background in my original drawing. The characters are standing on a grey flagstone floor in front of a blank grey wall that I turned into a brick wall for the redraw. I tackled the floor first. I found a method for drawing foreshortened flagstones a few months ago, and used that method again today. I started by drawing random rounded shapes with gaps between each shape, mimicking flagstones as viewed from above. I recolored those stones with a few variations of dark grey, then shaded them so that one side was in shadow and one side was highlighted. I then used a perspective warp tool to stretch the flagstone pattern until it appears to be receding into the distance on the floor, and did some final adjustments until it looked good. The brick wall texture was painted using a textured brush, adding sections of highlights and shadows very messily. After a while of just adding colour and texture, the bricks were looking very good, rough, weathered, and old. Unfortunately, at this stage, the bricks looked too textured compared to the flagstone floor, which now looked extremely clean and unnatural. I fixed this problem by returning to the floor with a different textured brush, and making the edges of the flagstones messier and rougher. Finally, I added shadows under the character's feet, and some cast blue light from Celeste, and it was on to the final touches. I added a bit more shadow to the corners of the image to make the central focus stand out, and some extra blue light on Celeste, then this image was done. This drawing took much longer than I expected. I guess I should have realized as much, trying to draw 4 characters in one image, where one character takes several hours for me. Unfortunately, working on one drawing for so long leaves me pretty tired of it by the end. I'm happy with the end result, but not as happy as I could be. I've probably just been looking at it for too long. I like the designs of each character. Lilith's is definitely my favorite. I love her eclectic and bright style. I'm not super happy with Kira's style, but that's more the fault of middle school me, who gave her a fashion sense and color scheme that I don't love now. Working with the descriptions I gave myself, I'm proud of how the characters look. Most of all, I'm very ready to move on and work on something else. I've been drawing these 4 girls all week, and I'm ready to start something new. I hope you enjoyed this second look at the world of Haunt School, and if you want to learn more about my middle school world building and attempted story writing, check out the previous video on the subject. Until next time, bye!